answers? I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth! You can't handle the truth!
This is Larry Connors USA. Larry Connors USA.
Trump posted on his social media, "For Iran, the clock is ticking and they better get moving fast or there won't be anything left of them. Time is of the essence, President DJT." Trump has been reluctant to restart military strikes on Iran. We have seen him nearing that point, but unwilling so far to pull the trigger. And yet it seems that Trump is growing very clearly impatient with the lack of progress in the negotiations that frankly aren't happening, and that he may be edging towards that decision. We'll wait and see here to see what decision he makes there. Pakistan tried to open up a window for diplomacy. Their interior minister was in Tehran over the weekend, meeting with the Iranian president, as well as the chief negotiator and speaker of parliament, Mohammad Ghalibaf, but it's unclear that there was really any progress made. And the gaps between the U.S. and Iran very much appear like they're too great to quickly bridge. And certainly with the speed that Trump wants to see them closed and wants to see an agreement here, that still remains, at least from our perspective right now, incredibly unlikely.
And the problem is Trump has allowed time and time again for another extension. And you know what you're hearing from the Democrats? If he moves forward and takes action against Iran right now, he's a hawk. He's just wanting to wipe them out. And he's given them continuous extensions. He's trying to avoid doing this. He does not want to harm the Iranian people more. But we're reaching a break point. And he's making it clear to Iran, as you heard in that news report, the clock is ticking. He has a meeting scheduled, I think, later this week, if not later, possibly as early as tomorrow, with the Vice President, Defense Secretary, I should say Secretary of War, Hegseth, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Mideast Envoy Steve Witkoff, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, CIA leadership. In other words, everything is being put in place. You've seen it in the movies where they plot out the map and they show where everything is. And when we're going to start doing this and this and this, we're that close. Are you watching on Zoom right now? Because you can see us. We're broadcasting right now. If you go to Larry Connors USA Zoom, I should say not Zoom, Rumble, Larry Connors USA Rumble, NewsTalkSTL Rumble. We are broadcasting so you can watch the program live. And if you're watching what I'm showing right now, we are this close for Trump pulling the trigger. Could he back off again? Yes. Pakistan's trying to see if that happens, but Iran continues to play the rope-a-dope right out of Ali. It only is going to last so far. Thank you for joining us for hour number one, Larry Connors USA, May 18, 2026. By the way, this month is speeding by, so let me remind you again. At Lindenwood University, June 2nd, that's a Tuesday, June 2nd, at the Lindenwood University, the Hammond Institute for Free Enterprise and NewsTalkSTL and others are coming together to present for you the St. Charles County Executive Debate. The three candidates will be on stage June 2nd. It will begin at 7 o'clock, and on that night, Larry Connors USA will air only 1 hour direct so that we can go to the debate itself. If you can get there in person, I suggest you do it. That is June 2nd. Go to NewsTalkSTL and get more details. With Larry Connors USA, you're always going to get news, analysis, opinion, and education. You will leave each hour with more knowledge than you have right now. In our next hour, former FBI Director Comey complained, oh my God, the FBI is under attack. You want to know why? And it's not so much the FBI, it's the leadership that still exists in there, and it's because of what you created when you were, quote, the leader. And Jasmine Crockett is crying foul. Oh, there's another whiner. Because the political maps are not going the way we want. It's not fair. It was perfectly fair when they were racially deciding how political maps should be drawn. Oh, speaking of race, There's a CNN commentator who had been a South Carolina congressman at one point, Bakari Sellers, and he makes such a bold statement that is outlandish about blacks today compared to what they had been in 1896. You will hear that in our next hour. Still later this hour, this nation is $39 trillion in debt. $39 trillion. We have a guest following up on a statement from a State Department spokesman who said, we are beginning to fall apart as a republic, and when it happens, it will happen quickly. Is that really going to be the possibility? My guest will discuss that coming up. And our story behind the story. On this date, 1980, Mount St. Helens blew its top. An amazing story of a survival of one who was caught in the midst of it, a photographer who was recording everything and continued talking when he thought, I might already be blind or dead. That will be coming up before we wrap up this hour. In the meantime, once again, we go to Fox this time for the report. Iran is on the clock.
This appears to be the final warning from President Trump, warning Iran that if it doesn't make a deal, he's going to end the ceasefire and resume bombing and full-scale combat operations, perhaps with Israel as well, posting on Truth Social, quote, for Iran, the clock is ticking, and they better get moving fast or there won't be anything left of them. Time is of the essence, signed President DJT. An Axios reporting Trump warns Iran the clock is ticking, as we just heard, until U.S. launches harder strikes. U.S. officials say Trump wants a deal to end the war, but Iran's rejection of his many demands and refusal to make meaningful concessions on its nuclear program has put the military option back on the table. Trump is expected to convene his top national security team in the Situation Room on Tuesday to discuss military options, two U.S. officials said. Now, here's a Sunday roundup from the lawmakers back home.
I think you can't get a coherent answer from Iran because they can't be coherent. I think they're so disheveled now, they're so weakened. Weaken them further and you may get a deal later, but you're not going to get a deal with this crowd until you hurt them more.
I fundamentally believe that Iran should never acquire a nuclear bomb. And that used to be all of every single Democrats had held that view as well, too. This isn't a crazy idea.
That you heard in the last. Senator Graham, Lindsey Graham, and then you heard Senator John Fetterman saying Democrats used to agree nuclear bomb could not be in the hands of Iran. But Fetterman is the only Democrat that's still standing with Trump. You've got to deny them to get that weapon. They cannot have it. In the meantime, there is a new concern involving Cuba, and this is a legitimate scare.
My understanding, the answer to that is yes. One of the sources we spoke to for this story said that this was specifically raised by Ratcliffe when he met with his Cuban counterparts down in Havana. It was also sort of a show of force for him to go down there. There's two ways to look at why the United States is coming out with this information now. And notably, Cuba is not denying it has the drones. It's just denying it would use them in an offensive way. It's saying it would only react to an aggression that is suggesting they would use them defensively. As the United States either wants to put more pressure on the regime in Havana to come up with a deal and tell them, hey, we know what you have here, and so let's make a deal. Or B, this could be a pretext for war, for an invasion, as Sam had just mentioned. What's pretty clear is that though there have been talks, the talks haven't been that fruitful, and the United States just keeps piling pressure on pressure on pressure on the regime in Havana.
That is Mark Caputo, White House correspondent for Axios, and we're talking about drones. An unnumbered amount of drones now in the possession of Cuba. Do I need to remind you, they are 90 miles off the coast of our nation. Senator Marco Rubio said last week he was offering the Cuban communist regime a $100 million American humanitarian assistance package to help the people. They're refusing. And what we're getting today is the figurehead president of Cuba is predicting a bloodbath of incalculable consequences, in his words, if we try to go into Cuba and take away those drones. Well, we cannot continue to let them just sit there, can we? In the meantime, the Department of Justice has indicted Raul Castro for what an event took place in 1996 when the Cuban Air Force shot down 2 unarmed Cessna planes operated by Brothers to the Rescue, an organization opposed to the Cuban government, but trying to go in and help provide humanitarian relief, and they shut down these planes, and now we are stepping forward and going to go after them. Former National Security Council Director Michael Allen.
I think the reason we would bring this up now is a signal to the Cuban regime that we're very, very serious about regime change, if you will, except not by way of military action. I think that was the purpose of Director Radcliffe's visiting of the island recently. I think that's the reason of some of the moves that we've been making of late to try and dangle out the prospect of some sanctions relief down the road, but not until fundamentally the Cuban state is heading in a different direction. Because today it's only resulted in misery for their people. And we need to figure out a way, as President Trump wants to assert more U.S. power in the region, the Western Hemisphere, a way to work forward with that island so close to us.
And again, we have, according to some of the claims, and we'll go back to Axios as they're citing, quote, classified intel, Cuba currently possessing more than 300 military drones, and, quote, might be considering hitting Florida, blaming Russia and Iran for supplying that technology. So whatever Trump does at this point, well, it may well depend on what Cuba does, or it may be that we need a preemptive strike to make sure they do not put drones in our airspace headed into the state of Florida or elsewhere. You want to be in the chair to make that decision? That's why you elected Trump. And he's got a staff around him that's very decisive. Cautious, decisive, but willing to do what is necessary to protect America and our citizens. I mentioned earlier about that 1996 event when the Cuban Air Force shot down 2 unarmed Cessna planes that were trying to bring in humanitarian aid and other support for, obviously, the regime opposed to Cuba. But they were unarmed, and they shut them down. Now, how did that happen exactly? I'll get into that in more detail for you coming up in our next hour. In the meantime, Trump continues to show his political power. Louisiana Senator GOP Bill Cassidy lost in a primary race over the weekend. Cassidy in the Senate since 2015 as, quote, a Republican. Well, he faced 2 Republican challengers in the primary. Both of them were endorsed by Trump. Anybody but Cassidy. Cassidy loses. Reaction from Louisiana Senator Kennedy.
Well, Peter, here's the way I see it. Unless you're God's perfect idiot, the result was predictable. I mean, ground control to Major Tom. The polls have shown for well over a year that Senator Cassidy was in trouble. I think the president's endorsement of Congresswoman Letlow was sort of the icing on the cake. Bill knew that, but he decided to run anyway. I respect that. I thank him for his service. He was very gracious in his concession speech. We now got a runoff between 2 fine people. For what it's worth, I don't plan to get involved. A wise man once said nothing. Why? Because he's a wise man. But I don't plan on weighing in, and, you know, if one of them starts talking about my mama, I might.
Yeah, he might, and he most certainly will. That is, again, Louisiana Senator Kennedy talking about his fellow senator from Louisiana, Bill Cassidy, losing his primary race over the weekend just to try to stay in. Cassidy of Louisiana, one of 7 Republican senators who voted to remove Trump from office after the January 6th so-called insurrection at the U.S. Capitol. Trump had written in a True Social about Cassidy, His disloyalty to the man who got him elected is now part of legend. It's nice to see his political career is over. So Cassidy finished third in a three-way race. Letlow and another candidate, State Treasurer John Fleming, advancing to June 27 runoff. And at last check, Trump was willing to endorse either one of them, primarily Letlow. And in conceding the race Saturday, Cassidy hinted he would not finish his second term quietly, but in an apparent dig at Trump, he also said he would not contest his loss. Listen to this quote. "You don't pout, you don't whine, you don't claim the election was stolen. You thank the voters for the privilege of representing the state or the country for as long as you've had that privilege, and that's what I'm doing right now." Dig, dig, dig in the face of Trump. But the Democrats have been doing the same thing, pouting and whining every time they lose an election or gerrymandering. And we know there's been so much evidence presented. There was a lot of foul activity in both elections that Trump, or all three elections, actually, Trump was involved in. Cassidy told voters you should cast your ballot based on the present and the future, not the past. For many primary voters, Cassidy's move to convict Trump felt like a betrayal. And then here came Trump with his endorsement of the other candidates. "We want to thank God for saving our airmen involved in an air show in Boise, Idaho. 2 U.S. Navy jets collided midair during a Gunfighter Skies air show. 2 Navy EA-18 Growler jets colliding midair. Looked like one flew right into the top of the other. Pilot error is probably going to come into play. But all 4 parachutes open as they got out of it." Oh, make note of this. Before the U.S. staff and traveling press left China the other day, they had dropped all their press credentials provided by the Chinese, burner phones for the White House staff, any delegation pins. They threw them away in a bin at the bottom of the stairs before they got on Air Force One. And you know why. Because we never know how China is going to try to steal information from us. Coming up, is our republic coming undone slowly and then maybe crashing? That will be the discussion with our guest coming up with the John Birch Society. And the story behind the story, it was on this date, Mount St. Helens blew. An amazing survivor story. Lock and load, ready on the right.
You are listening to Larry Connors, USA.
Another day must be another roofer in town. And John Beal and I were talking. He said, every time you turn around, there's a new roofing company. Many of them have no idea what they're doing, and the statistics show that many will be out of business within 2 to 5 years. Who are you going to call to help you then? You need to remember only one name, John Beal. John Beal Roofing. You have a problem, he can take care of it. And we'll be here for you. John Beal Roofing. Call 1-800-NEW-ROOF. 1-800-NEW-ROOF. Spring weather has everyone sneezing, even inside their home or building. Instead of saying Gesundheit, call Wellington Environmental to perform air tests to determine if mold levels are too high. Gesundheit is the same as saying bless you after someone sneezes, the German word meaning wishing you good health. Wellington Environmental can perform air testing that is simple, fast, and can identify issues keeping you from having good health. Wellington does the same for hospitals and nursing homes for indoor concerns. Give them a call. It's simple. 314-644-4930. 644-4930. Tell Cindy, I need air sampling. They've seen it all. They can help you. Next time you hear Gesundheit, think Wellington. Wellington Environmental. Be well with Wellington. True comfort is something you should feel every day in your home. It's the quiet of your mornings, the consistency of your indoor temperature, the way your home feels season after season. With Renewal by Andersen, from consultation through installation, Everything is handled by one experienced team, built around your home, your schedule. Our exclusive Fibrex material, stronger than vinyl, built for extreme temperatures. And right now, you can save 20% off your entire project. Plus, take an additional $100 off every window and door, up to $1,000. 20% off the entire project. Flexible financing is available, but you need to call by April 30th. 877-WINDOWS. RenewalByAnderson.com. 877-WINDOWS. RenewalByAnderson.com. It's that time of season when families, businesses are moving. For local or long distance, I endorse McGuire Moving. Get a date set soon before the schedules are booked. 314-241-0600. 241-0600. McGuire is constantly giving back to our veterans, such as Support Dogs for Our Brave. So with McGuire, you're getting excellent service and helping our vets. McGuireMoving.com.
This is News Talk STL. This is Larry Connors USA. Larry Connors USA.
Welcome back. We were raising the question before we took to the break. Is our republic about to come undone with a collapse gradually or suddenly? The other day, former State Department official Ron McCammon warned, and I'm quoting him, "Our republic is falling gradually. Total collapse will be sudden." So is America following the historical trajectory of previous republics? And part of it has to deal with our $39 trillion in debt as we approach being 250 years old. Our guest, Steve Bonta, publisher of The New American with the John Birch Society. Steve, glad to have you back on board, sir.
Hey, great to be back.
So
I think that quote is a reference to Hemingway. I think in one of his characters in one of his novels says something like, "I went bankrupt gradually and then suddenly," and it's been repeated often since.
I think you're right. I think he did kind of, but he didn't quote him in reference to Hemingway, but you're right. I think that was a linkage. But is that correct in any way?
It may well be. It may well be. I mean, I'm getting a lot of questions about that lately, and we cannot ignore this towering national debt. The question is, the ship is clearly heading towards the shoals. Do we have enough time to turn things around? I mean, I think we do, but the problem is, to extend the analogy a little bit, it looks to me like the ship is heading toward the shoals. It's clear where the course is going to lead if a course correction isn't made, but the problem is that the crew and the captain are all having a Donnybrook and fighting over who gets to hold the tiller. And so the ship is unable to turn. And that's what we're facing right now.
So are you referring to the president, the executive branch, and the legislative branch, or what?
All of the above. All of the above. And I would throw in the American people, I think, who still probably in the aggregate are not as concerned as they should be about what could happen. There's sort of the assumption that, America always muddles through financially and economically. And truly, if we do reach the point where we go off the fiscal cliff and we have a dollar collapse, or, to return to that metaphor, the ship does in fact run into the shoals, we're going to be on uncharted territory, because it's going to it will lead not only to the dissolution of the dollar, but to the entire dollar-denominated global financial system, if it comes to such a pass.
You also have to consider the input and the constant pounding of the drum by the legacy media. I think they almost want us to crash and fall apart.
Well, I think that there are organizations and people who want to see the dissolution of what they would consider to be a wicked, exploitative, racist, capitalist system.
Yeah.
And so there's no question that there are people who are secretly, and maybe not so secretly, cheering on America's impending financial and economic demise, and would love to see it happen.
there's a connection, obviously, between any fiscal instability and the leadership, and then do you move into an authoritarianism approach, or do you go for a ground level grassroots support? What's the answer?
Well, it's hard to know. I think that per the Constitution, if we restored constitutional money, got rid of the Federal Reserve System or phased it out in a reasonable length of time, and coupled that with a serious, sustained, principled drawdown of government spending, basically reduce the federal budget to within constitutional boundaries, we would be able to solve the problem rather quickly. So I think there's plenty of time. I mean, $38 trillion is a lot of money, even considering how degraded the dollar has become over the decades. But it's certainly a problem that can be solved. The question is, do we have the political and societal will to do it? In particular, will we elect the people who are willing to do it instead of just having a handful of, Thomas Massey and Ron Paul types in Congress warning about what's going to happen eventually, but the general consensus of the Demo-Republican mainstream being, let's not worry about it, kick the can down the road, and ultimately it's more important to continue the spectacle.
Well, Cassidy has already kicked out. Massey could well be next, but you still have the issue that Trump does continue to spend. We have a war issue underway. We're spending there.
Yep.
We have tried to cut back. We're trying to claw back money that's already has gone out the door due to fraud, mismanagement, not just by the Biden administration, but numerous, including Republican administrations.
Well, that's true, but I'd just like to respectfully point out that a lot of this fraud is occurring in agencies that really don't even have any constitutional basis for existing in the first place.
Amen.
So if you're simply saying, well, we're going to make these, what seems to be, by the way, what Trump intends to do, if you take him at his word, not to abolish these agencies wholesale, but to make them more streamlined and make them operate more efficiently. Well, we don't want more efficient, unconstitutional government. That's not what we want. We want to return to the limits of the Constitution so that we can restore the republic in its full vigor. And if we do that, I think a lot of these problems will maybe not solve themselves, but will prove to be a lot less acute than people imagine. But there's no question that if we continue for too much longer in the current path, be it guided by MAGA Republicans or radical left Democrats or some other alternative, we are going to eventually come a croppers of the laws of economics, and they're going to do the same thing to us that they did to post-World War I Germany and Argentina and many other countries.
Well, as you pointed out, we have inside our nation, we have those that will be more than willing to see this republic fall apart. And, you look at electing a Mondami to run New York City, and the first thing he says, we're going to need more money. Well, you already knew you needed more money, but you said you're going to offer this free and that free and that free. They push Marxism, socialism, communism, and then when they get a hold of it, they realize it's not going to work, but they're not going to give up the fight.
Well, and New York is a good example because, for a place that has so many intelligent people in the electorate, boy, are they gullible. Because what Mondani did was, of course, he went to the state of New York, hat in hand, and said, we need a bailout.
Yep.
And then once he got the bailout, he said, see, we've solved the problem. Well, the problem isn't solved at all. It's made immeasurably worse because it's, yet again, kick the can down the road with the full complacence, from what I can tell, of a majority of the New York City electorate. And so writ large, that's the problem we're dealing with in the country, is that people are so easily and willfully deceived by these shysters and mountebanks,
And it happens predominantly, obviously, within blue-controlled states and cities. And even New York Governor Hochul admitted, we're more dire straits than I thought. Suddenly she wakes up.
Yeah, well, in California, much the same, and these other states. But the problem is, these states have, New York, for example, is the center of global finance. That's where the New York Federal Reserve does its thing. It's where all the money center banks are. So if New York goes down, it's going to take the whole planet with it. It's just, and so the New Yorkers know this, and so they figure they've got the rest of us by well, I won't say by a lot, but let's just say that they've got us in a situation where they can continue to demand being bailed out, because obviously the alternative is, complete financial dissolution.
I thought we'd reach a point that we were going to recognize you're not too big to fail, and the fact that Wall Street could well fail itself, but we'll just relocate in Dallas or, who knows, Nashville.
Well, one would suppose. I mean, I would like to see that the reason that has not happened, that New York has, in defiance of all logic, and 100 years of socialist legislation contra kind of what the rest of the country would like, they still remain the center of finance. Why is this? Well, because when the Federal Reserve System was created, the New York Fed was given special authority. They're the ones that do all the transaction of government debt on behalf of the Federal Reserve System, and it's located in New York City, along with all the gold reserves of the Fed. So that's the reason that all of the privileged financial institutions that participate in this gargantuan monetary Ponzi scheme are located in New York City, and New York continues to be able to defy the odds. Elect all kinds of crazies as neighbors.
But is there any reason it cannot be relocated?
Well, in theory, no. But as long as the Federal Reserve System remains, and the New York Fed has an exclusive franchise over open market operations and things like this, in practical terms, ain't going to happen. So I mean, there's plenty of wealth in Chicago and Dallas and Charlotte and other places, but they don't have the access to the global currency supply, specifically the supply of dollars that the New York money center banks have. So until that state of affairs has changed, it's probably not going to be feasible.
All right, well, we're down and out of time. I want to thank you, Steve Bonta, publisher of the New American. You got a big article coming out anytime soon. We certainly should be following, I imagine.
Yes, well, go to thenewamerican.com and see for yourself. You can subscribe to our monthly magazine there in print or online, and we have lots of new material daily on the site that isn't behind a paywall either.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Steve. I appreciate your time. You bet. Points well made. Frightening points at that. The story behind the story today. Many of you will recall this event happening, but you're going to hear from someone who was caught right in the midst of it and praying to God he was going to get out. Not sure he was. The story behind the story, the eruption of Mount St. Helens.
You can connect with Larry on Twitter at Larry Connors USA.
I want to share something with you. Cooking a pizza using coal creates an amazing pizza. Only one place to get it, Napoli Brothers Pizza and Pasta in Chesterfield. Of course, they offer a wide variety of pasta, but you just visit the website NapoliSTL.com, dine in or take out, and get ready for patio season. Napoli Brothers Pizza and Pasta in Chesterfield Valley. Try it. You can thank me later. So many times, Vincent's Jewelers has helped me surprise someone special. Vincent's, locally owned, can do the same for you, and you don't have to break the bank to get something really nice, maybe even customized. The smile you're going to get back from that special someone, priceless. Check Vincent'sJewelers.com every day because new items are arriving and there are special deals. Vincent's, my only jeweler. Vincent'sJewelers.com. Vincent'sJewelers.com. True comfort is something you should feel every day in your home. It's the quiet of your mornings, the consistency of your indoor temperature, the way your home feels season after season. With Renewal by Andersen, from consultation through installation, everything is handled by one experienced team, built around your home, your schedule. Our exclusive Fibrex material, stronger than vinyl, built for extreme temperatures. And right now, you can save 20% off your entire project. Plus, take an additional $100 off every window and door, up to $1,000. 20% off the entire project. Flexible financing is available, but you need to call by April 30th. 877-WINDOWS. RenewalByAnderson.com. 877-WINDOWS. RenewalByAnderson.com. When insurance companies know you're represented by Onder Law, they know Onder is not going to let you be pushed around. Their reputation is built on years of courtroom battles. If you suffer an injury or damage to your property, serve the insurance company notice. You have Onder Law on your side, a St. Louis firm you can trust to protect you at every term. Don't settle for less. You want to win? Believe me, Onder wins. Onder, O-N-D-E-R, underlaw.com.
This is News Talk STL.
And they say you don't tug on Superman's cape, you don't spit into the wind, you don't pull a mask off an old Lone Ranger, and you don't mess around with Jim.
This is Larry Connors USA. Larry Connors USA.
Now, Larry Connors with the story behind the story.
May 17th, 1980. 40 years ago today was a beautiful day on the mountain in southwest Washington. It was also the most significant day of Carolyn Dreiger's life. She and a colleague had traveled to the active volcano Mount St. Helens to drop off equipment at a U.S. geological station. They planned to stay the night, but geologist David Johnston, tasked with monitoring the mountain, warned them against it.
He said, let's just have as few people here as possible. We were very disappointed that we were not going to spend the night looking at this beautiful volcano. The sun was just starting to set. We stopped and I took a couple of last photos of Mount St. Helens.
The very next morning at 8:32 a.m., Mount St. Helens erupted.
They are calling it the most violent eruption of this volcano in 32,000 years.
The energy that came out of Mount St. Helens that day is bigger than any nuclear weapon that we have in our arsenal.
Steve Olson is the author of a book about it.
The whole northern flank of the volcano collapsed into this valley that was between us, and that let out this burst of pressure that had been building up inside the volcano.
The blast triggered the largest landslide in recorded history and flattened trees for 220 square miles with a cloud of smoke, ash, and pumice. In all, 57 people died.
Now, prior to this date, May 18th, 1980, there had been more seismic activity that was, again, warning something is getting ready to happen. On March 20 of 1980, there was a 4.2 quake, Mount St. Helens. On March 27, steam started venting. And by the end of April, the north side of the mountain had started to bulge out. And then came May 18th, 8:32, I should say, in the morning, a second quake, magnitude 5.1. Gary Rehnquist was with others camping around the area watching. It's going to be a little hard to hear what he's saying as they're doing a two-way transmissions to others. Get out now.
Now we've got an eruption down here. Now we got a big slide coming off. The slide is coming off of the west slope. Now we got a whole great big eruption out of the crater. And we got another that opened up on the west side. The whole west side, northwest side, that slides down.
how far back and get out now. The eruption on May 18, 1980, the most economically destructive volcanic event in U.S. history, as you heard earlier. 57 killed, 200 homes, 47 bridges, 15 miles of railway, 185 miles of highway destroyed. And a massive debris avalanche triggered by that 5.1 earthquake. It reduced the elevation of Mount St. Helens summit from 9,600 feet to 8,300 feet, leaving a mile-wide horseshoe-shaped crater. With these warnings in advance, some of the property owners around Mount St. Helens and those visiting were given orders, you've got to move now, and we are establishing a range that we think you will be safe, but was it far enough?
A lot of people that own property up here that wanted to be able to get to their property, and geologists would issue warnings saying, no, we think the volcano is too dangerous.
No, sir, this is a road closed.
Then, as now, debate raged over whether to protect people's livelihoods or their lives.
They have to put a roadblock up just to keep the tourists out. What do they expect us to survive on? If it's so dangerous here, why are we still here? And I just don't, I think the whole thing is just ridiculous.
Ridiculously deadly, it would turn out. In fact, scientists had even drawn up new, larger boundaries which might have saved lives. But the plans sat on then-Governor Dixie Lee Ray's desk unsigned as she attended a rhododendron festival.
In fact, all but 3 of the people who were killed in the eruption were outside of the danger zones that had been established.
In other words, it wasn't far enough back. There was another issue that reduced the casualty count. This was a Sunday at the time of the eruption.
When the volcano erupted, 1,500 feet of the mountain vaporized in seconds in a violent, superheated cloud of debris, killing people as far away as 20 miles.
I think people would think a cloud of dust and debris, doesn't seem that dangerous.
Yeah, this was more than a cloud. It was more like a stone hurricane, essentially. A hurricane made up of pulverized stone that was moving with such force that it could just knock down anything in its path.
One of the first to die, geologist David Johnston. It turns out he hadn't planned to be on the mountain that day. He was filling in for his colleague, Don Swanson.
He had taken my place on Saturday night.
In the 45 seconds before the cloud hit, he was able to radio out one last warning, telling the Vancouver monitoring station, this is it. His body has never been found.
There was a KOMO news photographer who was also caught in the danger zone. He survived with an amazing story. So, yes, there is more to the story behind the story.
You are listening to Larry Connors, USA.
Do you know why I endorse Cafe Napoli, all the locations? Visit any of them, and you will quickly appreciate the quality of food, service, atmosphere. So maybe I'll see you at Cafe Napoli in Clayton, Napoli Kirkwood, Napoli 2 in Town and Country, Napoli 3 in St. Charles, right next door to Napoli C. Or maybe you'll find me at Napoli Brothers Pizza and Pasta in the Chesterfield Valley. Now you know why I endorse Napoli, NapoliSTL.com.
This is Larry Connors USA. Larry Connors USA.
Now, the end of the story behind the story.
When the mountain started going, I looked back up towards St. Helens again, and I saw a wall of water and mud and trees coming down the hill towards me very quickly. I obviously got in my car, took off, looked in the rearview mirror, and saw it catching up with me rather rapidly. I knew I didn't have any chance at all to outrun it, so I came up on a little logging road on the left that led down into a gully and up onto a hill. And I thought maybe I could make it down through the gully and up on that hill and get out of the water's way. I started down the hill, and I made it, I was going about 60 miles an hour when the water hit the gully and took out the road, and it exploded the road. It didn't just wash out, it just exploded with flying trees, rocks. Threw the car in reverse, started back up the hill at about 30 miles an hour, and the whole back side of the hill came down. So I was trapped right in the middle, and right then I really thought I'd had it. I got out of the car. The alarm went off. That's like I said, you heard the alarm going off. I was not too worried about it at that time. I got out and I thought, well, I might as well break out my camera and start taking some pictures. And that's what I did.
That's just what we see right here.
Yes.
What was the time frame, the time span, from the time the mountain blew until the time that this water and wall of mud was enveloping you?
That's real hard to say. Gosh, it seems like anywhere from 10 seconds to 2 hours. It's just, there was no time frame to it. It was just something that just happened. There wasn't a real definite feeling of time for me at all to it.
All right. The time that you took off and now you're stranded was the span of about what?
It was probably about 5 minutes.
All right.
Approximately.
All right. You were stranded.
Like I said, there were so many things happening so fast that there was no real feeling of time to it.
One little area, you in the car, and now you're shooting this film.
Yes.
Okay. This is when the ash begins to fall.
The ash had been building in the sky above me. It was all moving towards me. The ash was not coming down on me at that time. I was still thinking that I was going to get a lot more water and a lot more debris coming down the mountain. And that still had me pretty worried. But then I noticed that the lower washout in the lower gully that I'd first tried to make, it started subsiding some. And I thought, if I'm going to have any chance of getting out of here at all, that is the way I've got to go. So I grabbed my camera gear and I started out in that. It was mud. It was moving fairly slowly. It was steaming. It was deep, and I didn't really think I was going to make it through it to the other side, but I did. So I made it through it, and I started up a logging road, and that's when the ash hit. The ash and the sulfur hit.
All right.
The ash and the sulfur. And again, that is KOMO photographer David Crockett. Not Davy, but you can call him that. But then as all this began to unfold around him, he kept his camera rolling and recording the best he could.
Well, dear God, whoever finds this, I don't know. You can't see this, I'm sure it's too dark. I've left the car behind. Rest of the gear, we got one magazine. And as you can tell probably from this picture, I'm walking towards the only light I can see on top of a ridge. I can hear the mountain behind me rumbling. It's an enormous mud and water slide came down and washed out the road. I never really thought I'd believe this or say this, but at this moment, I honest to God believe I'm dead. There's really no way to describe those feelings. I feel the ash now in my eyes. It's getting very hard to breathe. Burns to breathe. I'm having trouble talking. It burns to breathe. Burns my eyes. Oh dear God. My God, this is hell. I just can't describe it. It's pitch black. Just pitch black. This is hell on earth I'm walking through.
It was hell. And that plume of ash and sulfur rose something like 12 to 16 miles above sea level. FAA sent out warnings to pilots to avoid the area. The ash plume was moving to the east at a speed of about 60 miles an hour. It reached Idaho by noon. Found on the tops of cars and roofs the next morning as far away as Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. After the 1980 eruption, the volcano experienced continuous volcanic activity until 2008. Geologists predicting future eruptions could be more destructive. It still remains to this day a popular hiking spot and is climbed year-round. And in fact, in 1982, 2 years after the eruption, the Mount St. Helens National Volcanic Monument was established by Congress. But those hikers, maybe if they had heard the story of that KOMO photographer, David Crockett, and what he went through that day, they might have considered otherwise, because, as you heard him say, he thought he was in the midst of hell, and was not sure he was going to make it out.
God, I want to live. You know, Shram, you were right. You were right, Shram. When I saw that mountain go, I turned that car around, and I could see in the rearview mirror, you know, I could see the stuff coming. There was no way I was going to outrun that. I just parked that car, and I started running for high ground. And that mud flow came down. It came within 3 feet of the car, man, with trees and boulders and things, you know, 5 times as big as that news car, Shram. Oh, about 50 feet from me. My God, you were right. Never should have come up here. You were right. I still say I'm going to live to tell my grandchildren about this, though. With God's help. With God's help, I am.
With God's help, he will be able to tell that story to his grandchildren. In his early 20s, when he was on the mountain at that time. Mount St. Helens is about 90 miles southeast of Seattle. And since all the wind was going to the east, Seattle was not threatened. It is northeast of Portland, about 50 miles, so they saw some ash as well, but most of it was falling into more remote areas. Still, once again, you had almost 60 dead in that one moment. On this date, 1980. Our story behind the story tomorrow, we're going to take a little lighter approach. My days as an entrepreneur selling spud nuts. You know what spud nuts are? Well, I'd sell you one. Oh, by the way, preview for the story behind the story Wednesday, the Joplin tornado. As always, we appreciate you listening. Tell your family and friends. And above all, keep around for our second hour. And remember our pledge, one nation under God.
You can hear podcasts of this program at Larry Connors USA Facebook. Larry Connors USA Facebook.
John Bill Roofing reminds you we are in the stormy season, and that means if you have even the smallest leak in your roof, you could soon have a much bigger issue. Call the John Bill to make sure that your biggest investment is protected. That call can save you major dollars. If you do get hit during a storm, John Bill has a rapid response team. Call 1-800-NEW-ROOF. 1-800-NEW-ROOF. 1-800-NEW-ROOF, John Bill. There's only one place you can get pizza cooked over coals, Napoli Brothers Pizza and Pasta in Chesterfield Valley. Of course, Napoli Brothers has a great selection of pasta dishes. Between the pizza and pasta, trust me, you will not leave hungry. Then, a few doors down, Lit Cigar Lounge, a wide variety of quality cigars, each offering a unique smoke. That cigar, some premium whiskey, all you need to do is enjoy. Lit Cigar Lounge and Napoli Brothers Pizza and Pasta, Chesterfield Valley. It's that time of season when families, businesses are moving. For local or long distance, I endorse McGuire Moving. Get a date set soon before the schedules are booked. 314-241-0600. 241-0600. McGuire is constantly giving back to our veterans, such as support dogs for our brave. So with McGuire, you're getting excellent service and helping our vets. McGuireMoving.com. So many times, Vincent's Jewelers has helped me surprise someone special. Vincent's locally owned can do the same for you, and you don't have to break the bank to get something really nice, maybe even customized. The smile you're going to get back from that special someone, priceless. Check Vincent'sJewelers.com every day because new items are arriving and there are special deals. Vincent's, my only jeweler. Vincent'sJewelers.com. Vincent'sJewelers.com. Let's be candid, honest. No out-of-state law firm can represent you better than Onder Law. O-N-D-E-R. Hometown roots, attorneys living right here with you and your family. When you suffer an injury, because someone else was negligent, under law will make sure the other party takes full responsibility. You'll get full compensation, not a backroom deal worked out with some insurance companies. And, of course, we're moving into the stormy season. And, again, when you have a legitimate claim, you should be properly compensated. Under law does not toy around with adjusters, investigators, lawyers trained to cheat you of what is rightfully yours. Under law has already recovered millions for families across Missouri and Illinois. Under wins. Not just a catchy phrase, it's a fact. So I'll repeat it. Under wins. Underlaw.com. ONDER. Underlaw.com. Wins.
This is NewsTalk STL.
You want answers? I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth! You can't handle the truth!
This is Larry Connors USA. Larry Connors USA.
Well, we just have to prosecute as much as we can, and we have to accept that, yes, there are going to be some blue states that fight us, but that doesn't mean we can't do our job. And for every person that slips through the cracks because of a crooked judge, we're going to get 10 people who actually go to prison or suffer real consequences for it. And we're also saving the American people a lot of money. You know, one of the things I've learned as vice president, I think the president, of course, appreciated this from his first term, is that you can have a rock-solid case, you can have a fraudster, you can have them dead to rights, you can have them literally in a text message confessing to the crime, but sometimes you're still going to have corrupt judges. I think it drives home the importance of getting better judges in the system, but also going after this stuff in a number of ways.
That is an excellent point by Vice President Vance, saying we have so much fraud in the system already, and it's tough to deal with because we got a lot of fraudulent judges. They're not really looking at the law and order. They're looking at advancing progressive issues. The ones turning illegals loose when they're charged with multiple crimes, still letting them go out on bail. Then, of course, you get into stealing from the U.S. taxpayer. And again, well, let's just turn a blind eye. It's not a big deal. Yeah, that's basically an attitude. It's a frightening attitude, is it not? That we would have this kind of judicial system in these days. How did we get here? Because we got a little careless and continued to allow the leftists to get stronger and stronger and stronger. I want to give you a couple of shocking examples of what could happen. And yet at the same time, it can be turned around. First of all, the New York Times is facing a lawsuit from Israel over a recent, as they describe, hideous and distorted article. You know what this article did? It claims Israeli soldiers were using their dogs to rape Palestinian prisoners, defaming the soldiers of Israel, perpetuating a blood libel about rape, trying to create a false symmetry between the genocidal terrorists of Hamas and Israelis' valiant soldiers. Those are the words of Benjamin Netanyahu. So they're filing that defamation lawsuit against the New York Times, claiming it as one of the most hideous, distorted lies ever published against the state of Israel in the modern press. Now, the reporter, according to the New York Times, well, this guy has a good credentials. He's done a lot of stories, two-time Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist. You know, there was a time the Pulitzer Prize held value. But the way it's been given out lately, kind of like the World Peace Prize, Nobel Peace Prize, I should say. If Obama can get a Nobel Peace Prize with just months in office, accomplishing nothing, it devalues everyone who has earned it rightfully. And the same on this Pulitzer Prize. Maybe his prior reporting did deserve Pulitzer Prize. I don't know. I hadn't bothered. But this kind of article, this kind of trash, is there documentation to what he said? No, just stories, anonymous sources. In the meantime, take a look at what's happening in Spain. Spain wants us basically out of the country, will not let us use our military base in Spain for refueling or anything else as we pursue to defeat Iran and keep them from getting a nuclear weapon. And the Spaniards, and I say the Spaniards' leadership, are they so stupid they don't realize that those ballistic missiles Iran has can reach right into the heart of Spain, Madrid and elsewhere, Barcelona? So the Prime Minister of the Spanish Socialist Workers' Party suffered a historic defeat yesterday in regional elections in Andalusia. That's considered a bastion of far-left politics in his country. Good. Spaniards are beginning to stand up and say, we do not want the CRAP in our nation. They're beginning to fight back. The rest of Europe is beginning to fight back as the culture is stolen from them by people coming in, even as, quote, legal immigrants that they allow in. But they're not coming to assimilate. They're coming to distort, destroy your country, your culture. And they will over a short period of time. Welcome to hour number 2, Larry Connors, USA. May 18, 2026. Every program, we are on fire, coming out of the gate like a bull. We've got so many things to cover, and I change gears a lot. So buckle up your seatbelt. With Larry Connors, USA, you're going to get news, analysis, commentary, and education. You're going to leave each hour with more knowledge than you have right now. And reminding you, when we're on the air like right now, we are streaming video. You can watch the program. I see more and more of you doing so. Glad to have you. How do you watch? Well, you go to NewsTalkSTL Rumble, Larry Connors USA Rumble. And everything goes up as a podcast later that you can see and listen to at NewsTalkSTL, LarryConnorsUSA.com, Larry Connors USA Facebook. You miss anything, you go back and pick it up. One of the stories coming up in this hour, the DOJ filing criminal charges against the president of Cuba for an action that took place in 1996. But a more pressing issue in front of us right now reports that Cuba has 300 drones provided by Iran, maybe Russia as well. And in the meantime, we have FBI Director Comey looking for anybody, and the leftist media, they're more than willing to suck up to him as he goes around crying out, the FBI is under vicious attack, an unwarranted attack. It should not happen. But just listen to this.
Do you still talk to employees at the FBI regularly?
I do.
And what do they, are they afraid to be talking to you?
Yes, as a matter of fact. They're under siege, and I think about them a lot. I worry about them a lot, both those who are still there and those who've been thrown out while loved ones are sick, while they're struggling financially. There's a lot of pain at the FBI and the FBI community right now, but it's not going to last forever.
He would have you believe that all the FBI agents are under attack. The credibility of the FBI and our other intel agencies, be they national or foreign targeted, CIA and so forth, it has been damaged by the actions of people like Comey, Brennan, and Clapper, and Obama. The FBI itself has a lot of good people in it. Thank God they stayed and have been able to hold on even during the Comey reign and are still there. Kash Patel still has a lot of fires to put out. There's no doubt about that. And a perfect example of what they did and what they took part in. Our deputy Attorney General, Todd Blanche, say, just look back at the Russian hoax.
The whole Russia hoax, there was absolutely nothing to it. And so the question that the American people have to ask is, well, then why did they do it? Why did Comey say what he said? Why did the outgoing Obama administration do what they did? And that's what we're studying right now, because it did great damage to this country. It did great damage to President Trump's first term. And we want to understand why that happened, why there continued to be an effort by operatives in the government to go after President Trump while he was in office. And then, of course, over the past several years as well.
Comey was part of that. He won't discuss that issue. And he still wants you to believe that that photograph of the seashells he supposedly found on the beach, 8647, killed President Trump, basically. Well, I just happened upon them. I don't know how they got. I don't know. And we're supposed to buy that story? Well, President Trump, of course, is meeting with chief advisors regarding Iran, making it clear my patience is running thin.
This appears to be the final warning from President Trump, warning Iran that if it doesn't make a deal, he's going to end the ceasefire and resume bombing and full-scale combat operations, perhaps with Israel as well, posting on Truth Social, quote, "For Iran, the clock is ticking, and they better get moving fast or there won't be anything left of them. Time is of the essence," signed President DJT. An Axios reporting Trump warns Iran the clock is ticking, as we just heard, until U.S. launches harder strikes. U.S. officials say Trump wants a deal to end the war, but Iran's rejection of his many demands and refusal to make meaningful concessions on its nuclear program has put the military option back on the table. Trump is expected to convene his top national security team in the Situation Room on Tuesday to discuss military options, two U.S. officials said. Now, here's a Sunday roundup from the lawmakers back home.
I think you can't get a coherent answer from Iran because they can't be coherent. I think they're so disheveled now, they're so weakened. Weaken them further and you may get a deal later, but you're not going to get a deal with this crowd until you hurt them more.
I fundamentally believe that Iran should never acquire a nuclear bomb. And that used to be all of every single Democrats had held that view as well, too. This isn't a crazy idea.
That last person speaking who says the Democrats used to agree with this, too. Iran should not have a nuclear bomb. That was Pennsylvania Senator Democrat John Fetterman. And he's right. Many Democrats did agree. And I think many of them still agree. But they don't dare speak out. I want you to keep in mind, if you're paying extra at the fuel pump, if you're paying extra for your groceries, if it's making things tougher on you and you listen to the leftists cry out, oh, the affordability issues. Every time you hear that from them, ask, well, what about the money you stole that we could have in our pockets? But more importantly, this is not just about oil leaving Iran. This is about making sure Iran does not get a nuclear weapon. And as long as they're allowed to get their oil out of Iran and into Russia, China, they're going to make money so they can continue their war of terrorism around the globe. You sitting at home right now or driving in your car, you think you and your family are safe? Well, you are today. But what about tomorrow or the day after? The day Iran gets a nuclear weapon, the world won't just change. It could evaporate. And they don't care. They're more than willing to die and take you and your family out. Keep that in mind, please, every time you look at the gas pump prices. They aren't going to begin to come down. And Trump has made it clear. I've had it. We've given them opportunity after opportunity, and they still won't come to the table and deal with the issue that really is important. You will not pursue nuclear weapon capability. And Trump, of course, just left his visit with China over last week, and our U.S. ambassador to China has this evaluation on what we did accomplish.
What President Trump is doing is trying to correct the malaise in the United States over the last 25 years, where we saw some of our strategic industries hollowed out by the Chinese. And it was an unlevel playing field that allowed that to happen. And that's why he's fighting right now to correct that. Rare earth elements, magnets, commercial shipbuilding, pharmaceuticals, as you said. We're in a potential time of vulnerability, and the Chinese have showed the world, frankly, that they're willing to weaponize that, and that's why President Trump went to China. A lot of people said, well, do we really want to have a better relationship with China? I say, oh, hell yeah, you have to. And right now, but you have to stand up for what's important to the people of America, and that's what this president has been doing since his first administration, and this trip was a continuation of that. Again, these conversations were tough. President Trump is making his positions known to the people of China.
Made it very clear, but at the same time trying to find a way to involve more trade. Ambassador Greer.
We are focused on mutually beneficial trade. So when you're talking about that kind of thing, what we should be exporting, what we should be importing, becomes less a question of concessions and more a question of what's mutually beneficial for both of us. That's why we're so focused on non-sensitive trade, because that doesn't require concessions. That's about working together, talking about what they need, what we want to sell, what we need from them. So we're already seeing it as they've re-registered beef facilities where beef facilities expired. They're taking poultry again. They're working with us on biotech traits to make sure that those types of products that have genetic modification can go into China without any problem.
So we're trying to get that. We're trying to make some inroads. Does China want to have a relationship with the U.S.? There have been debates over that, if they really want it. What they really want, of course, is total world rule. We know that. But do we want to continue to constantly get into more and more battles with them when maybe there are other options? And this country is so lost in its history right now. I want you to hear from a CNN commentator, Bakari Sellers, who at one time was elected to the South Carolina Congress, youngest congressman to ever be elected to the state house, I should say, and then, of course, making more grounds. But listen to him as he compares the past with today. This is disgusting.
If somebody fell asleep in 1896 and woke up today in 2026, they would simply say the only difference is now Negroes have a TV show and we wear nice suits. They swapped out Klan hoods for Brooks Brothers suits. And that is the problem. I mean, Plessy v. Ferguson was 7-1, and it gave birth to 50 years of Jim Crow. What we have with this court right now, what we're seeing is watching people who have fought and died and bled so that we would have access to the ballot box, so that we would have access to our voices being heard in Congress, being ripped away. And I think that there is a casual laughter from people we believe to be our friends on the right who are showing us true colors today, because the most sacred, or one of the most sacred acts you have in the United States of America is the ability to cast a ballot and elect someone and send them to Congress, the State House, or a mayoral seat that represents your interest. And now black folks throughout the South are being silenced.
No, they're
and I
not.
don't find that to be a laughing matter.
No, they're not. They're not. And it's because you gerrymandered political districts based on race, not the numbers inside each congressional seat. Sellers, at just 22 years old, made history in 2006, becoming the youngest South Carolina state legislative member, the youngest African-American elected official in the nation. Didn't hear him crying out about Jim Crow then, did you? Coming up, charges filed against Raul Castro by our government, and Cuba might have 300 drones aiming at our nation. Lock and load, ready on the right.
You are listening to Larry Connors, USA.
Spring weather has everyone sneezing, even inside their home or building. Instead of saying Gesundheit, call Wellington Environmental to perform air tests to determine if mold levels are too high. Gesundheit is the same as saying bless you after someone sneezes, the German word meaning wishing you good health. Wellington Environmental can perform air testing that is simple, fast, and can identify issues keeping you from having good health. Wellington does the same for hospitals and nursing homes for indoor concerns. Give them a call. It's simple. 314-644-4930. 644-4930. Tell Cindy, I need air sampling. They've seen it all. They can help you. Next time you hear Gesundheit, think Wellington. Wellington Environmental. Be well with Wellington. McGuire Moving is silver certified, which means they are great at relocating senior citizens. In fact, McGuire is a household name because McGuire understands the stress involved when moving older adults. So if you or family members need help moving, I highly recommend McGuire Moving. 314-241-0600. 241-0600. Get a free in-home estimate. McGuireMoving.com. John Bill Roofing reminds you we are in the stormy season, and that means if you have even the smallest leak in your roof, you could soon have a much bigger issue. Call the John Bill to make sure that your biggest investment is protected. That call can save you major dollars. If you do get hit during a storm, John Bill has a rapid response team. Call 1-800-NEW-ROOF. 1-800-NEW-ROOF. 1-800-NEW-ROOF, John Bill. So many times, Vincent's Jewelers has helped me surprise someone special. Vincent's locally owned can do the same for you, and you don't have to break the bank to get something really nice, maybe even customized. The smile you're going to get back from that special someone, priceless. Check Vincent'sJewelers.com every day because new items are arriving and there are special deals. Vincent's, my only jeweler. Vincent'sJewelers.com. Vincent'sJewelers.com.
This is News Talk STL.
You can run on for a long time, run on for a long time, run on for a long time. Sooner or later, gotta cut you down.
This is Larry Connors USA. Larry Connors USA.
Ambassador, Cuba's top diplomat in the U.S. says negotiations between America and Cuba have made, quote, no progress so far. I would assume that at a certain point, Cuba would have to start making some sort of deals if they are just in such bad shape.
One would hope so, but it doesn't mean they have to do it. I mean, they have been stubborn for years. Their economy's been declining for years. Their population is fleeing the country, particularly university grads under 30 years old. They've been in collapse, and they've refused to even do what Vietnam has done in terms of opening the economy. Cuba should be booming. It's not. It's a basket case, and these guys stubbornly have stood up to everything and refused to reform. And my reading of it is because they are simply afraid to do so.
That is a former Venezuelan ambassador with the situation with Cuba. Trump has made it very clear, look, we went into Venezuela, we took out Maduro and freed his people, let them make their own decision on their government, but they're no longer under a dictator. And yes, we're taking oil from Venezuela. I know there are many out there, oh, it's all about the oil. It's all about, well, in major part it is. But at the same time, it's a matter of keeping it from going to our enemies and using that as profits to continue terrorism around the globe. We have in our nation right now an untold number of terrorists. Some we already suspect that they got in under the Joe Biden open border policy. Thank you, Joe Biden. And others being sent here by China. We talked about this before. We did again last week with Gordon Chain, an expert on China. How many young military-age men crossed the border, often in the dark of night, even though the border was basically open during the Biden hours, days and weeks and months and years. But they came across at night. Why did they bother at night? Because they did not want to be detected. Why? Do you see where that goes? And in the meantime, this cannot be denied, regardless of what is going on in Cuba. And Secretary of State Rubio the other day said, we offered the communist regime in Cuba a $100 million humanitarian assistance package to help the Cuban people. Rubio is of Cuban descent. He said, I want to help the people of Cuba. There's certain parameters you're going to have to meet for us to give you the money because we want to make sure it gets to the people, not to the leadership. Yeah, they're not interested, not unless they get control of everything. But here's the more frightening thing. Axios is reporting, quoting intelligence sources, that Cuba now has something like 300 drones that they got from where? Russia? China? Iran? Bottom line is, do you want 300 drones in the hands of Cuba 90 miles off our shore? Mark Caputo with Axios.
My understanding, the answer to that is yes. One of the sources we spoke to for this story said that this was specifically raised by Ratcliffe, who, when he met with his Cuban counterparts down in Havana, it was also sort of a show of force for him to go down there. There's two ways to look at why the United States is coming out with this information now. And notably, Cuba is not denying it has the drones. It's just denying it would use them in an offensive way. It's saying it would only react to an aggression that is suggesting they would use them defensively. As the United States either wants to put more pressure on the regime in Havana to come up with a deal and tell them, hey, we know what you have here, and so let's make a deal. Or B, this could be a pretext for war, for an invasion, as Sam had just mentioned. What's pretty clear is that though there have been talks, the talks haven't been that fruitful, and the United States just keeps piling pressure on pressure on pressure on the regime in Havana.
Now, again, that's Mark Caputo, White House correspondent for Axios, which is a left-leaning, left-standing publication, but pointing out the facts that, yes, Ratcliffe the CIA director, made it clear that Cuba has something like 300 drones. Other intel sources have indicated that. Ratcliffe didn't say it directly, but Cuba's not denying it. Of course, they don't want to deny. They want us to continue guessing. Do they or don't they? I want to go on the side of caution. I want to make sure if you have them, you're not going to get to use them against our people. 90 miles from the shore of Florida. And they can easily reach Florida and beyond. In the meantime, the Department of Justice is going after Raul Castro for something that happened in 1996. I want you to hear it as described by former National Security Secretary Director as he's talking to former Congressman Trey Gowdy, Michael Allen, as to why these charges were filed.
I think the reason we would bring this up now is a signal to the Cuban regime that we're very, very serious about regime change, if you will, except not by way of military action. I think that was the purpose of Director Radcliffe's visiting of the island recently. I think that's the reason of some of the moves that we've been making of late, to try and dangle out the prospect of some sanctions relief down the road, but not until fundamentally the Cuban state is heading in a different direction. Because today it's only resulted in misery for their people, and we need to figure out a way, as President Trump wants to assert more U.S. power in the region, the Western Hemisphere, a way to work forward with that island so close to us.
And there's a vast Cuban population in Florida, and they want to see the Cubans released from the dictatorship of the Castros. Now, why file these charges against Raul Castro? This involves a 1996 event. A Cuban Air Force jet shot down two unarmed Cessna Skymaster aircraft operated by Brothers to the Rescue. That is an organization opposed to the Cuban government, but also was trying to give aid to their people in Cuba. The Organization of American States reported no warning was ever given. The Cuban government sources said, well, these people knew what they were doing. They were warned. They had entered Cuban airspace. All of those on board those two planes died. A third Cessna was targeted but escaped. They were releasing, and they admit they were, thousands of pamphlets in addition, basically trying to encourage revolution. Now, I will point this out. If you violate Cuban airspace, you're going to be subject to being shot down, which is a little different than if Biden had been in Cuba. Maybe he would have done it different. Maybe he would have allowed them to fly all around and drop. God, the reason I say that, did he not allow a Chinese balloon to cross our continental states? Not dropping any leaflets, but collecting who knows what kind of information? But according to Cuban authorities, those two planes entered Cuban territorial aerial space in January 1996, releasing those leaflets. And so they were shot down. And now we're filing charges against the Cuban president for downing two planes that had no way to return fire. But in a Cuban television interview after the shoot-down happened, one of the men who returned to Cuba the day before the shoot-down, later implicated as having organized the shoot-down as a Cuban spy placed with the group, he said, I personally violated airspace. Specifically, the last was on January 9, 1996, when I got a call the day before to participate in a flight to Havana. Thousands of leaflets were going to be released from about 9,500 feet. You know, they were trying to spur revolution inside Cuba. I don't like the fact that they shot down two unarmed planes, but I will tell you again, the Cuban authorities have a better concern and greater concern and better understanding of what our border security should involve. You violate our airspace, we will bring you down. Contrast that in 1996 with Joe Biden's era, when that Chinese balloon flew all the way across our continental states. They said, well, we couldn't shoot it down over the states. Who knows where it would have fallen, would have caused all kinds of problem. We had spotted it a good 30 miles before it entered Alaskan nautical space to begin with, while it was still over the ocean, and we took no action. We took no action over Alaska, we took no action over Canada, and then we let it traverse our nation. I'll say this for the Cuban leadership at that time in 1996. You violate our space, we will knock the stuff out of you. And they did. If a Joe Biden type had been running Cuba at that point, it's, oh, let them do whatever they want. We won't care. We'll just pick up the leaflets as trash. In the meantime, the Trump White House is doing everything it can to protect American taxpayers. A task force is activated, and you're going to hear what it's doing and what the plans are. And also Jasmine Crockett crying out again, oh, my Lord, Jim Crow is back. You don't want to miss our final segment. Stand by, please.
You can connect with Larry on Twitter at Larry Connors USA.
When insurance companies know you're represented by Under Law, they know Under is not going to let you be pushed around. Their reputation is built on years of courtroom battles. If you suffer an injury or damage to your property, serve the insurance company notice. You have Under Law on your side. A St. Louis firm you can trust to protect you at every term. Don't settle for less. You want to win? Believe me, Under wins. Under, O-N-D-E-R, underlaw.com. McGuire Moving is silver certified, which means they are great at relocating senior citizens. In fact, McGuire is a household name because McGuire understands the stress involved when moving older adults. So if you or family members need help moving, I highly recommend McGuire Moving. 314-241-0600. 241-0600. Get a free in-home estimate. McGuireMoving.com. When I have business clients or guests from out of town, I often take them to Cafe Napoli. I know they're going to enjoy any of the Napoli locations. Cafe Napoli in Clayton, Napoli 2 in Town and Country, Napoli 3 in St. Charles, next to Napoli C, Napoli Kirkwood, or Napoli Brothers Pizza and Pasta in the Chesterfield Valley. Excellent food and intellectual conversation, if they bring the intellectual conversation. And NapoliSTL.com. NapoliSTL.com. You should know that when I endorse Wellington Environmental, it's because I believe and know they will do you right. Wellington takes pride in providing homeowners and businesses whatever they need. You need some dustless blasting, they will take care of that. You need some mold remediation, they can do that. They take pride in training their team to perform multiple services and having the equipment ready to get jobs finished. That's important to you. You make just one call, and you call a company that's been around for more than 35 years with more than 45 technicians in the field. Most of you know finding good workers, then having them show up on time could be difficult. Not for Wellington Environmental. They're there at the designated time, ready to go. Check them out to see what they could do for you. Dustless blasting or anything else you need. Wellington Environmental, 314-644-4930. 314-644-4930. Be well with Wellington.
This is NewsTalkSTL.
Hit the road, Jack. Don't you come back no more, no more, no more, no more. Hit the road, Jack. And don't you come back no more.
What you say?
Hit the road, Jack. And don't you come back no more, no more, no more, no more. Hit the road, Jack. And don't you come
This is Larry Connors USA. Larry Connors USA.
So all the agencies are supposed to have anti-fraud prevention systems in place. The Biden administration turned a lot of those off and let them languish. And what we were able to do, basically sort of like building on the DOGE effort, is work with these agencies with the data that they have, the data that other agencies have, and publicly available data, and build technological solutions, most of which are AI-driven, that can take all of these data. And so when a claims payment request comes in, basically AI puts up a flag and says, very likely fraudulent. And all of the agencies have administrative authority to withhold those payments until they know that this is a real person that's actually qualifying for this request. If you have to do that by hand, if you have to have individuals go out and figure all these out, the money just goes out the door, and then you have to get DOJ to chase it, and they can't get it all back. So using these advanced automated technological solutions, that's the way you supercharge the effort, and you keep the money in the agencies rather than watching it go out the door, chasing it. And the reality is, we've learned in this process, so much of this money that goes out the door leaves the country. It goes into the hands of like an immigrant here in America, and they send it to another country, including Somalia. That is why this is so important. It's got to stay in the agency, and AI is supercharging this.
Outstanding. That is Andrew Ferguson with the White House Anti-Fraud Task Force. He's the vice chair, saying how we are now using AI to go out and stop the fraud as we see it flagged. Do not let the money go out the door. Once it goes out, it's very hard to claw it back. You might get some of it, but you won't get all of it. Do you really think all those who took money fraudulently and knew they were taking it fraudulently, you think they would be willing to just come forward and say, oh, here's the money back? We shouldn't have done that. Even if you offer amnesty, I don't think they would be coming forward offering it. They're thieves. What would you expect from them? Take note of this. President Trump dropping a lawsuit against the IRS today. He was seeking $10 billion in damages because they leaked his tax returns. A former IRS contractor was convicted in 2023. May I repeat that? Are you listening? A former IRS contractor was convicted in 2023, not charged, convicted, of leaking tax returns of Trump and other wealthy Americans to the media, and obviously the legacy media who loves to destroy Trump and supporters. He got a 5-year prison sentence. Now, here's the thing that might be happening behind the scenes. Trump's decision to withdraw that lawsuit might be linked to a move to create a $1.7 billion compensation fund for the Republican presidential political allies who were investigated under Joe Biden. All the lies and everything took place in the smears and so forth under Biden. This would include hundreds of Trump supporters who were prosecuted for involvement in the January 6, 2021 assault on the U.S. Capitol. Trump, of course, issued a mass pardon to the January 6 defendants on his first day in office. And keep in mind, a lot of people rounded up did nothing wrong. They got to the Capitol. They didn't know what had taken place before they got there. They were simply walking through politely, not destroying, not taking CRAPs in the hallway, as some did, not trying to deface, not trying to steal, maybe taking pictures of themselves there, which were then used as evidence against them. Democrat Senator Chris Van Hollen, in a post stated on X, Trump is dropping his bogus lawsuit against the IRS. How's it bogus if you convicted a guy for actually leaking the information? Anyway, this dropping his bogus lawsuit against the IRS in exchange for a slush fund, courtesy of your tax dollars, he can use to pay off political allies. I'd say providing proper compensation for those injured by the Biden administration when they weaponize the DOJ against the American people. But I got to tell you, you look at some of the leftist publications and the way they're reporting it, you don't get that picture. You think this is just creating a slush fund. They're going to take the words, as I just quoted them from Senator Chris Van Hollen. It's creating a slush fund to pay off his political allies. If you were a Trump supporter and you got rounded up in January 6th or any other kind of actions taken against you, because the Department of Justice was clearly weaponized under Joe Biden. And that includes the FBI and everybody else associated with it. By the way, independent journalist Alex Berenson just scored another victory for free speech. He settled a lawsuit against the federal government for $150,000. An acknowledgement that, quote, the government did in fact violate the First Amendment by exerting substantial coercive pressure on social media companies such as Twitter to suppress disfavored speech like Berenson's. Now, that does not end his case, nor others who have claims. In 2020, he got a heavy following on Twitter as he criticized a public policy response to COVID-19. Did you challenge COVID-19? Did you put that on Twitter or Facebook? How quickly did you get slashed and ousted? Happened to him as well, but he decided to carry the fight out. He said, Twitter became the primary outlet for my journalism. His lawyer said it earned him hundreds of thousands of followers. The company resisted calls from third parties to censor his reporting. And Twitter permanently banned Berenson. He was unaware at the time of this concerted effort that there was pressure from representatives of vaccine manufacturer Pfizer working with the Biden administration. Do you remember the Biden administration acknowledging, yes, we sat down with members of the pharmaceutical groups to see what we should be pulling off and not putting up. Remember that? They absolutely admitted it, but they said we were doing it in the best interest of what? Best corporate interest of the parties involved and their stockholders. So the district of court, after looking at all these charges, and Berenson decided to file 3 claims arguing the government violated the First Amendment and conspiracy to violate his First Amendment rights. Count 3 was a state law claim for interference brought against 2 Pfizer defendants. They all wanted the cases dismissed. No kidding. I'm looking at a piece from the Federalist writing about this and said that it's important to recognize Berenson sued the government defendants in 2 capacities, in both their official capacities and their individual capacities. So what we had, and we all know and recognize, the left under control of Joe Biden had weaponized the entire Department of Justice. And you were not allowed to say anything on Twitter or your social page without being condemned, ostracized, basically booted out of the area. You know that. And yet the same things that we were complaining and saying then might be possible. You can not even mention the word ivermectin on your social page without suddenly being labeled, you're a possible terrorist inside our nation. You won't accept our COVID-19 rules, which now they admit, we didn't really have a lot of science about that. We just kind of drew it up around spitballing around a bottle of Jack or something. I don't know what they were drinking. And it still burns me to no end that they let the statute of limitations for Fauci expire last week, maybe the week before, I've lost track of time now, to get him on perjury before Congress. But his first in command has been charged criminally, not just for perjury. I don't think it's out of the realm that he continues to roll over. I mean, do you want to go to prison for Fauci? I would not. Even if I were part of the scheme, I'm not going to go to prison for the guy. I hope we get a lot more out of this guy. And Fauci is finally held accountable. And you cannot put him deep enough under the jail to satisfy me for what he did to our nation, our public, our children. Now, from the mind, and this is a dangerous area. I'm going to tell you right now, this is like walking through a minefield. I do not advise it. But from the mind of Jasmine Crockett, more trash, more lies, because of the recent Supreme Court decision regarding that Louisiana congressional gerrymandering.
You, as someone who came up through Texas politics, what's your reaction to how this is playing out?
Yeah, this is exactly what happens when democracies are in free fall, and that's exactly what we're experiencing. Listen, you and I first met one another when I was a state representative and I was fleeing the state of Texas, and it was over maps then. By the time they were going after the new maps that we ran on in March, guess what? I had already been in litigation over the previous maps because they were problematic, and it was a Trump-appointed justice who agreed that even what they were doing in this moment was racist. But 4 days before our filing deadline, that was when the Supreme Court decided to say, nope, we're not going to deal with this. It's too close to the filing deadline, and therefore we won't touch it. But we know that they've changed their tune as relates to, say, votes that have already been cast.
That's Jasmine Crockett on, obviously, a legacy media outlet willing to give her space and time. And I just added to it. I know I did that. But I doubt you follow and watch MS Now. And I don't encourage you to do it. I'll do it for you. But you can do it on your own as well. But I'm going to make sure you're aware of what they're doing over there on the other side. They continue to perpetrate and create lies. Let me remind you again, the Louisiana congressional redistricting map got tossed by the Supreme Court because it was based on race, not numeric equation. As I said in a commentary the other day, when it came to drawing the congressional map in Louisiana, They did not use a calculator looking at the total state population and dividing it by 780,000 or 800,000 and see how it would fall out based on an AI map. No, they used crayons, black and white. And they made sure that the black areas were well protected. Tennessee, as I pointed out previously, basically red. Memphis is purely Democrat, mostly black politicians, black voters. But that does not mean every black voter supports a black politician. It doesn't. But that's the concept that they want to push. If you missed our first hour, I was replaying a clip of Bakari Sellers from CNN, one of their commentators now. Now, he made history in 2006. In 2006, he was just 22 years old when he became the youngest South Carolina state legislative member, the youngest African-American elected official in the nation in 2006. You didn't hear he cries out about Jim Crow law prevented me from having a chance to run and win, did you? No. But as they have shoved more illegals into the congressional districts, especially where they want to create Democrat strongholds, and plus illegal voting, there's a time of reckoning. A time of reckoning hit over the weekend, by the way, for Senator Bill Cassidy of Louisiana. He was one of 7 Republican senators who voted to remove Trump from office after the January 6th event. Trump said he needs to be removed. Anybody but Cassidy. So he finished 3rd in a 3-way race for the primary. Trump has endorsed Letlow, Julia Letlow, basically. But he's also given endorsement to the state treasurer Fleming. Anyone but Cassidy. So Cassidy is out. His next target, Kentucky Senator Massey. Same situation. The Trump political power is still there. And the Democrats fear it. And they'll look for a way to disrupt the election again. I promise you. Oh, look from Canada. Look what happened in Canada. Canada now announcing they have a positive hantavirus case in Canada. You know the wilderness area of Canada? Do you imagine there are a lot of deer mice running around, which carries the hantavirus? I'm sure they've had cases before. No one made a big mention of it until suddenly this might be the next COVID. That's what they want you to believe. We're going to go back to the words of President Trump. Our response this time to the government, if they dare try it, and it's not going to be under the Trump administration, we will not comply. Please join us again tomorrow. Remember our pledge, one nation under God.